Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Lone Angler Podcast. Oh my gosh, man. Episode 166. Phenomenal. You guys are in for a real treat. I reached out to Sarah the Closer Parvin. And the reason I reached out to her is she is a monster bluegill hunter. And I learned that she's a monster bluegill grower. A very, very fascinating story about the Slab Lab. It's her and her father's lifelong project and a lifelong goal. I'm not going to drop any spoilers right off the bat yet. But, man, I had a really, really, really good time talking with Sarah. And I hope that we can do another one when that goal is achieved. But I hope you guys are all staying warm out there. I know it has been ridiculously cold here in Bemidji. So much so that, I don't know, man. I might not get out ice fishing until my birthday. I might take the day off and I might go fishing. I don't know. You know, next Friday is my birthday. I might do that. I may do that. The one thing that I have to do right now, and I don't have to, but I want to do right now, is give a big thank you to Panfish Pursuers P3 Plastics for supporting the Lone Angler. If you head on over to their website, p-3plastics.com, you can go under Pro Staff Picks or just Pro Staff. You're going to find a Lone Angler pack. That's right. I have coughed up my information on my favorite profiles, favorite colors that I use up here in northern Minnesota for chasing down big crappies and big bluegills. There's also the crafty pack, but yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. He's weird. He's also my best friend, and you can't go wrong with his pack either. The guy's an absolute hammer. So if you use the code OGSPUG15, man, you're going to save yourself 15% off your total order, man, in that shopping cart. So go ahead, head on over there, get yourself some of the finest microplastics that have been on the ice ever. I'm just going to say it because I love them. Hey, huge thank you to Della Rods. I was just chatting with those guys today. We're gonna try to work on a little bit of something. I'm gonna do some R&D for those cats, man. I got myself a couple Della rods. Those guys wanted to do a little something on the podcast. We made it happen. Got a little code for you here too, you know, for that one. LAPFREE. LAP stands for Lone Angler Podcast, but you're just going to type in LAPFREE and get free shipping from Della Rods. They got a complete ice lineup, open water rods, spinning, casting, muskie, fly, you name it. Matter of fact, I'm already kind of piecing together what I want for a fly rod from Della Rods. So head on over to their website, www.dellabayrods.com, or it's Della Rod. See, I didn't write it down, and just, the internet's so good, man. Just type in Della Bay, bam, boom, it'll be there. Get some fishing rods in your cart. Ice, open water, man, LAP free shipping. Hey, also, big thank you to Ridgetop Outdoors for supporting the Lone Angler. Got a little message today from Justin Schuver. My Jiffy Scout auger came in. Yeah, a little 2.5-inch auger. I want to use it for camera holes. He didn't have one in stock, but you know what he did? He got one for me. It showed up. Got a personal message. I got to stop in after work and pick it up. That's the kind of service you can expect from Ridgetop Outdoors. They're located on Highway 71, right where Highway 71 goes over Highway 2, right there, the southern part of Bemidji, right before you get into town. It's right on the way as you're heading up to Red Lake or Lake of the Woods. Stop in there, pick up some minnows, some extra jigs, some new line. They got it all right there. So thank you to Ridgetop Outdoors. Man, you know what? I'm not gonna hold you back any further, man. Just sit back, enjoy, learn about growing giant bluegills in the South. Have a good one, and we will talk at you soon.
Hello.
Hello, Sarah.
Hey, Patrick, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, well, I can't complain too much. We've got some cold air moving into Alabama, so it's a little tough for us because we're not used to it. But other than that, we are doing good.
Yeah. What's your definition of cold air?
Our wind chill for Friday is 5 degrees.
Okay. I spent a few years in Kentucky, and yeah, that's cold for down that way. Even though Kentucky is just a little bit north, that's going to be chilly for you guys.
It sure is. So we're trying to get prepared for it now.
Not trying to flex on you or nothing, but at 4:30 in the morning when I got to get up for work, it'll be, I think, with the wind chill, minus 48.
Okay, you win.
It's really hard to describe what that's like. I've always, like, when I moved down to Kentucky, getting to know people and then telling them where I'm from. I grew up 100 miles from the Canadian border. They always asked a lot of questions about winter, and I always just said, once it gets below zero, actually, once it gets below 10 below zero, it all kind of feels the same. It just hurts a little. It just hurts a little faster.
That's right. That's right.
Well, why don't you give us a little rundown, introduce yourself. I know that all of a sudden you just popped on the scene courtesy of Big Bluegill on Facebook. We'll get into that for a second, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So I'm Sarah Parvin. A lot of people know me as the Closer.
Yes.
That's a nickname that I have earned in my job, in my profession, which is the real estate industry, which I've been in for almost 18 years now. So people kind of bring me in to tie a deal together just to get things done. I grew up in Lower Alabama in the Montgomery area and have moved to Huntsville. I guess I've been in Huntsville now right at 20 years up here, and just fell in love with the area. We've had crazy growth in our area, and we've got, pretty much no seasons here. Now that we've talked about all that cold, I know that doesn't make sense, but we have the perfect conditions to really grow trophy fish. So that's one of the things that I am working on and have all of a sudden become known for are my trophy copper-nosed bluegills.
Yeah, that's what grabbed my attention. I've been a pan fisherman, man, for a long, long time. Back when I was younger, I'll be 48 here coming January. Well, actually, it is January, probably next weekend, I think it is. And
well, happy early birthday to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I started out fishing, it was all about bass fishing. I was a big fan of Hank Parker. Still am.
Yep.
And I remember him winning the classic, that famous clip. Just put him on the scale, Dewey. Let's see what we got. It's an old clip, and that was my dream. I wanted to be a tournament bass angler, and I don't really know what happened. I started catching big bluegills and in around like my mid-teens or late teens, and I became fascinated with that fish. Mm-hmm. And is that kind of, where did your fascination with big bluegills come from?
Well, I have been fishing for as long as I can remember. Matter of fact, my entire family fishes. My older brother is really into the pelagic, the saltwater. He chases the big, I call them saltwater dinosaurs, big billfish, marlin.
Okay.
My dad and my grandfather got me into fishing at a very early age, and my aunt worked for Ray Scott at Bass. So I sort of grew up thinking, like, everybody fishes. This is normal. This is just what you do. And I'm in the South. A lot of us, this is what we do. With our downtime, they fish or they hunt. We're just outdoorsy people, if you will. But really, how the bluegill came into play is actually a very interesting story. So just to back it up and sort of long story short for you here, my dad and I have a private pond, and we have built it and worked on it for over 20 years. And as things happen in the wild, they happen in privately managed ponds too. We had a fish kill about 3.5 years ago, and we had a total fish kill. We lost 100% of our fish. It was a perfect storm of things that happened, complete devastation. There were several double-digit bass that floated up. It was just one of those things. We just had a really bad storm that came through, knocked power out to all of our destratifiers, our paddle wheels. So we had no way to keep oxygen in the water at an acceptable level. And it just happened to be in July, like the hottest month here in Alabama.
Yeah, well, that same thing happens up here in the wintertime when our lakes freeze over. We get a thing called very similar. It's the same process. It's just a different temperature. The water doesn't get any more oxygen if it's too shallow.
That's right. So we basically had to start from scratch, and we intended to start back over as a trophy bass pond. And we do have a bass program in with our bluegills. However, fast forward to year 2, which was would have been spring of 2020. Okay, we start catching the bluegills, and we stocked them in. They are pure copper nose. We stocked them in from American Sport Fish down here in Auburn, Alabama, as fry. So we start catching them, and they have a different look to them.
Oh, yes, they do.
We realized very quickly that not only did we have the correct genetics, but that the feeding program that we had made the change to this time with the pond, since it had, turned over and we'd lost everything, was doing something different. And my dad and I both quickly realized, holy crap, we're growing trophy panfish. Like, this is actually happening. And it is quite the sight to see because, I'm like desensitized to it. So 1.5 pound bluegill is nothing to me. I see that all the time. Like, it's nothing for me to see a bluegill of that size. Matter of fact, that's what I would call the small ones that we have at the Slab Lab. So anyway, we realized very quickly that we had something different and unique, and that we were going to sort of pursue that and push the envelope with it and see how far we could go. So we would love to produce the next world record copper-nosed bluegill, and that is our goal. And that is our only goal.
What is the world record copper nose?
4.12 pounds.
4.12 pounds. Did that come from Alabama?
It did. It is also our state record. Okay.
All right. Now I want to unpack some questions here about the world record bluegill. For many, many years, I've always been fascinated with trophy fish. And, I was a member of the International Fish Game Association for a long time, and in looking through their record books and whatnot, and the bluegill, now I'm assuming this is a pure strain bluegill. Supposedly the world record came out of a lime, what do they call them? It's like a lime.
Quarry.
The quarry down there by Alabama. I think it's Kentonka.
Yeah, Lake Katona.
Katona, that's it. There it is. Many, many years ago. And in doing some research on my own and trying to find the stories and that kind of stuff, I ran across some interesting tidbits. And I know that the fishing world, there's lots of, I don't want to say haters, but it can get kind of judgmental. And there was people saying, well, those were shellcracker, they were hybrids, this or that. What do you know about them?
Oh, so that's a loaded question for me because
sorry to put you on the spot.
I have gone down this rabbit hole only because my dad and I are so very close. And what we have swimming in our lake right now at the Slab Lab is considered state records for almost all 50 states in the United States. So there's you want to have that acknowledgement, that recognition, right? Or else you wouldn't do it.
Right.
However, you don't want to dethrone someone else who quite possibly is passed on now, but whose family holds that memory really dear to them. You know, their dad, grandfather, great-grandfather catching that world record bluegill. I have seen multiple taxidermied species of that world record bluegill, and I'm going to be real honest with you. It's got orange and red on it, which leads me to believe that it was in fact a shellcracker, or some sort of hybrid, because the copper-nosed do not color up like that. They just don't.
Oh yeah, and like our bluegills up here in Minnesota are what they consider northern strain or pure strain bluegill, and they do not have that pale purple face at all.
Well, and you can get some, you know, depending on the turbidity of the water or where they're spending a lot of time, if it's muddy, if it's rock, however they're living their life, bluegill color changes, and it can change daily. But what you don't see is red or orange on that ear tab or on the breast of that bluegill. You can see some gold and some yellow down a copper nose, but you're not going to see that deep red and orange that is a big characteristic of a hybrid or a shellcracker.
Yeah, and in the pictures, I'm picturing them in my head, and I'm trying to think, do they still have that distinctive sky blue or baby blue right underneath the gill?
They do.
Okay. I've seen so many pictures of them, and like I mentioned earlier, I've known Bruce Condello for a long time. He used to run a website called BigBluegill.com. I've been friends with Jim Gronoff for a long time, and those were the guys that introduced me to a little place in, I think it's in North Carolina or South Carolina. I can't ever keep them straight, but Richmond Mill.
Yes, which they say now Richmond Mill, because keep in mind, I'm just sort of coming on the scene here the last 18 months with what I've got going on in my backyard, so to speak. Richmond Hill is where they are saying that is predicted to be the place where the next world record bluegill is called.
Right. Yes, Bruce, when he started going out there, you know, and posting the pictures to bigbluegill.com, this was kind of before Facebook really took off. I was just like blown away. And at the time, I think Richmond Mill, through the Kingfisher Society, was giving a nice little package to bigbluegill.com members. And I came close to flying out there. Part of me was thankful that I didn't, and I'll get into that in a second, because I was in college at the time, and I could barely afford ramen noodles, but I was going to try to figure out a way to get it done.
Right.
The part that I'm thankful for that I didn't go is I don't know what would happen to my bluegill fishing here in Minnesota if I caught a 3-pound copper nose or a 3-pound bluegill.
Ruined. You'd be ruined for life. And what we would say in the South to you is bless your heart. You have been ruined for life. When you hook into a 3-pound bluegill, people severely underestimate how much fun it is, first of all.
Yes.
It's a lot, you know, people that don't fish big bluegill or haven't caught big bluegill, they fight a lot like smallmouth. So they really are it is a fight, especially with ultralight, you know, gear. I mean, you just have the time of your life. You really do.
Yeah. Well, our state record here in Minnesota, it actually came from a lake just south of where I live, 2 pounds, 13 ounces. Which
beautiful big fish.
It is. That is a huge fish. I believe it was caught in 1945, and that is an exceptional fish because our growing season here is pretty small.
So short. Yeah, y'all have one of the shortest growing seasons for those type of fish. So that is very impressive, and probably why that record has stood so long and will continue to stand for a while, because it's really tough in the wild to produce a bluegill that size.
It is.
They just get eaten. I mean,
well, yeah, they get eaten. We've got a lot of big pike and big muskie around here. A lot of decent sized bowfin. Those they really like eating a lot of bluegill and stuff. But that's what I kind of key in on when I'm hunting these natural lakes, is I look for a large predator base with a low bluegill number, and knowing that the bluegill that are in there that have survived are actually going to be larger than your average bluegill, just because it keeps keeps the herd thin, and the competition for the food, it keeps that in check. That's what I've learned over the years. It seems to work here and there, but you're right. Like, around here, raises eyebrows is, of the 10.5, you start getting 10.5 inch and better. That starts raising some eyebrows. And I sent you the picture of the one that caught last fall.
Yeah, beautiful fish.
Yeah, it was I was fishing by myself, and it's actually on YouTube, and I was able to get a couple still shots just trying to do that by myself and whatnot. But and that lake, it kind of reminds me of the same situation you have going on in your backyard. It's a lake, it's a natural lake, but it's pretty much private. And when I was a kid, we used to fish there. Nobody lived around the lake. We used to just cut through the field and go in an old rowboat. And we only had an hour because it had a hole in it. But we would catch these bluegills, and we'd have to hold them with two hands. 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids have to hold them with two hands. They were massive. Now, my uncle lives on this lake, and he was digging through some old photos, and he was showing me some photos of these fish that came out of there. And I know that they used to eat 2-pound fish out of there. I've seen the pictures of them. And they didn't know any better back then. This was like, the mid-'80s, early 80s.
Well, and that's exactly one of the reasons why I am so vocal about sharing my catches and trying to sort of raise awareness about it, because there's like this sort of secret underground society of pan fishing, big bluegill people, we feel kind of like the redheaded stepchild of fishing. Like, I'm just going to call it the way that it is. That's sort of how we feel. Yeah. But at one time, trophy panfish were prized above bass. Many years ago, long time ago. And there was a reason for that. It takes so much to produce a trophy bluegill in the wild that they're just super rare. They're, to me, as rare, if not more rare, than that big double-digit bass that all of us, bass fishing anglers chase. And there's just something to be said about, catching a 2-3 pound pure copper-nosed bluegill. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so vocal about it and I share so much, is because, your granddaddy's uncle's cousin sister is down here filleting a 2.5 pound bluegill, and it's like, dude, that's a freaking trophy fish.
Yeah, we've got the same thing going on up here. It's actually starting to get a lot better. Our state Department of Natural Resources is starting to implement certain regulations on various lakes, decreasing bag limit size. And a lot of that has stemmed from years of us bluegill heads, or bluegill weirdos, if you want to call it that, saying, hey, that 10.5 inch bluegill that you're about to make into a meal is exactly like it's the same thing as filleting a 10-pound walleye. Because walleye is the fish up here. It's our state fish. It's stocked everywhere. People come from all over to fish walleyes in Minnesota. And so when you say it like that and put it in that perspective, it starts changing gears a little bit. Because there was, for a long time, it was just common thing like, wow, that's big enough to eat. I remember hearing that all the time. Oh, wow, we can get a lot of meat off that. Well, now that I'm older and I realize that it takes forever for a bluegill to get, a pound up here, you start putting that relation to it. Like, would you eat a 10-pound walleye? Well, hell no, man. I'd put that on the wall. Yes, we're slowly changing that visual idea of what a bluegill is. It's not just a meal anymore.
Right, and that is exactly what I want to do, is to change that narrative. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why I want to sort of, change the narrative about bluegill fishing and pan fishing altogether. But that is one of the main things, because people don't know what they don't know, right? And then we're in the day and age of social media, and people constantly, in the fishing world, which is where I live, 90% of my life is, everything fishing. That's what we see is what people put out with their content and Instagram and things like that. And it's just like, if you had any idea those 10 bluegill that you have in that picture that you called a mess of, that you're about to make a whole bunch of sandwiches out of, if you knew what that could have been if you had put it back, and I'll say this, there are some of the smaller bluegill that we do keep out of our pond. Our bigger ones go back in. They're catch and release. Some of the smaller ones we have to pull out. We have to cull out fish. That's the way that the pond works. You have to do that. And those do get eaten, and they are delicious, and I have no problem with it. But seeing a trophy fish in somebody's cooler and knowing that they're going to go home and fry it in some hot grease, man, it just ruffles my feathers so bad.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. And you hit a really important point, and it's also my personal point of view too. Is that selective harvest thing. Just like your privately managed ponds, we can't manage our lakes. That's the Department of Natural Resources job. We can't stock fish in lakes. We can't transfer fish from one lake to another. But what we can do, and this is what I've been kind of trying to promote, is we can, as an individual, put your own regulation on. So what I like to do, if I'm fishing a lake up here that has trophy bluegill in it and it's not very big, I'll just use my uncle's lake for instance. I took some notes down, and we're getting like a 9.5-inch average,
right?
And the 10s and 10 plus are kind of getting smaller. So that tells me there's a year class in there that is significantly larger. And
right.
If we don't pick some of those out of there, we're going to start seeing they're going to start getting skinnier. They're going to start getting longer tails. That tells me that food, there's too many. There's not enough food to sustain the structure of a 10-inch bluegill.
Right.
And a person can do that on their own, on their favorite body of water or wherever they're going. Hey, so my general rule that I like to follow and that I suggest to other people is 9 inches or under for a meal. Anything over 9 or 9.5 setback. If you want to keep a big one for the wall or a replica, by all means, go for it. I would never deny somebody a trophy. I've been asked that question myself in my bluegill, quest, I guess you could call it. Pal, what would you do if you caught, a 2-pound bluegill or you caught a state record bluegill? And I'm very forward with it. I would say I would skin mount it. And my reason behind that is it's not greed. I guess it could be a little tiny bit. I'll be honest with everybody. A little tiny bit. There's something about having that skin mount, the actual fish. The other part of it is the odds of that fish living a couple more years is probably pretty slim.
Very slim, because once they reach a certain point, the average bluegill life cycle is 5 to 7 years. In a natural lake like the one that you probably fish, a 2-pound bluegill is most likely towards the end or near of its life. Like it's almost lived its life cycle.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see if anybody's... I only know of one study that the Department of Natural Resources here did, but it was on black crappie up on Rainy Lake, which is up by the Canadian border. And they aged a 16-inch crappie at 21 years old.
That surprises me.
Yeah, it's a shocker.
I really didn't think that crappie had that long of a lifespan, to be honest with you.
No. Yeah, they aged one that was 21 years old. Now, I haven't found a whole lot of information on bluegill growth rates up here. And then again, I haven't looked in a long time, and maybe that's something I should do. But I think we're right in the fact that a 2-pound bluegill caught in northern Minnesota, I'd be willing to bet that fish is 10 to 15 years old.
I mean, it would. Well, I mean, it could possibly be that old. It would be rare for it to be that old.
Yeah, and the only reason
they just don't live that long.
The only reason I say that maybe that long, or I have a tendency to lean that way, is because of our shorter growing season.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think maybe down south in the warmer water, they might age. You know, their growth to age might be much quicker.
Yeah.
You know,
there might be some truth to that as well.
Yeah. But going back to now, you're talking about your ponds. Do you guys, like, is it almost, and I hate to use this word, but I don't know how to say it, because there's some negative connotations with it, but is it a pay lake type situation, or is it a privately run resort ranch? Completely
private. Nobody fishes there unless I'm there and they're with me, and I don't open it up for guide trips. Family and friends has pretty much been it. I've had a couple of pro anglers come in that have been down for, you know, certain tournaments when they come to fish Lake Gunnersville, that have come over and fished with me. But as far as a pay lake or anything like that, no, not at this time.
Okay. So this is just like a personal project.
It's a personal it's an experiment. That's why we call it the Slab Lab, because we're basically doing some weird science, and and we're seeing the rewards from that weird science. My dad is a retired doctor.
Okay.
So he no longer practices medicine. This is what he does. He grows trophy fish. We literally eat and breathe these bluegill. Like, I don't think people understand the amount of work and dedication it takes to do this, especially when you are rebounding from a pond that completely turned over and we lost everything just 3 years ago.
Yeah, I can wrap my head around the dedication, the work.
Yes.
And it's not just about, you know, going to, you know, some fish hatchery or Tractor Supply, buying bluegill, and then, you know, pitching, you know, food off the dock. There's a lot, like you were saying, you've got to establish that predator-prey relationship.
Yes.
You had summer kill. You know, you obviously know about, you know, you're monitoring your oxygen levels. I mean, there's a lot to it.
It is a whole production, and that's something that I try to let people like in on, because what they see on a lot of my social media is the end result, me holding this massive bluegill in this pretty little picture, and it's all, you know, really nice. But what you don't see is the hours a day loading feeders, running paddle wheels, creating current, pushing food out, electroshocking, like all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And I'm going to do a better job about showcasing all of that, because I think it's important too for people to know, like, they didn't just happen to be this big. They were done like this with a reason, and this is how we did it. Because I truly believe that we will pull the next world record out of the Slab Lab. I believe we will.
I can't wait for the day. I think that's going to be really, really cool. Have you ever reached out to Bob Lusk?
I am friends with Bob Lusk and a longtime follower of Pond Boss magazine. Think the world of him. I always try to jump on his Facebook Lives when he's doing his pond talk. But yeah, so I'm very familiar with him and Dr. Condello. I actually talk to Dr. Condello pretty regularly about what we've got going on, and we exchange advice and pictures and things like that. So yeah, they're definitely great people in the pond management community. Yeah,
I've jumped on to some of his live feeds, and super interesting. And then at the same time, for us up here to have a pond, it's really expensive and a ton of work, because it has to be, if it doesn't have any current flowing through it, it's going to have to at least be 20 some odd feet deep, or else you're going to end up with winter kill, and it's going to have to get aerated through 4 months of winter. Like I said, right now in the morning here when I get up for work, it's supposed to be 48 below zero. A lot of the lakes have about 16 inches of ice on them right now up here.
Holy cow.
And we have a a few more months of this yet. I mean, February is traditionally our coldest month, and we're already hitting the minus 50 mark. So
yeah,
to have a pond in your backyard up here, it's not. I don't even think there is any, at least up here. Maybe down in southern Minnesota, at the very bottom of southern Minnesota, there might be something like that. But up here, right next to Canada, no.
Yeah.
Just doesn't happen. But now, growing the world record, a lot of work. Totally get that. And I'll admit, one, you're really easy to talk to. This is awesome because I try to be as open as possible, and I'm going to be that right now. I have debated, and this debate started when I was living in Kentucky. Their state record bluegill is supposedly, it's like 4 pounds, something like that. And in the regulations, it just says farm pond. And this is how this wrestling match in my head started. I was talking to a guy at work, and I said, how does that count as a state record? Well, it's the biggest bluegill caught in the state of Kentucky. I'm like, yeah, I get that, but it's from a farm pond. And where I grew up, public water. All of our records, mostly as far as when you look at the lake names, it's all public.
Right.
And so I gave him the analogy of, well, I mean, I could, if I had a big enough aquarium, I could grow a new Minnesota state record if I wanted to, but would that really count? Have you heard that in your? Okay. What's your take?
Yeah, I've heard just about everything. I've heard people compare it to high fence deer hunting.
Right.
And I totally get it, but it's my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, because believe it or not, the things change very quickly in the fishing industry. But the last time I checked, the IFGA does not discriminate between farm pond and public lake. The farm pond, now when you say farm pond down here in the South, I'm thinking about a pond on the farm.
Right. Out in the cattle field or something.
Out in the cow field, but what they mean is, as long as we are not commercially reproducing the bluegill.
That's the first I've heard that.
Yes. So that's where, and to be honest with you, I really wouldn't give a flip if they did or they didn't count it, because I will know that my dad and I did it, and we will have it, and it will have meant something to him and I. So, because a lot of this is very sentimental for me as well. So,
perfect.
But it is my understanding that yes, it would count.
Okay, because when I joined the IFGA? Yeah, International Fish Game Association. I always get the acronym screwed up.
Yep.
I was all excited because I was going to start chasing some line class records, because those are kind of wild.
Right.
And there was some that I was like, man, this is completely doable. Like rock bass and just odd stuff that we have up here. And I started on my quest. I wasn't successful at any. And then the next year the book came out, and there were some changes. There's no longer line class records recognized for rough fish and panfish in there. And I was like, what's up with that? And I never reached out to ask them why. And I don't know if it was just a popularity contest as far as the rough fish goes, or if there were too many submissions from the panfish world, or what that deal was. So I found that to be kind of interesting.
Yes, that is.
And like you said, though, things change in the fishing world very quickly. So it has been a few years since I've gotten that book, and maybe I should sign up and take a look, and maybe it's back. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I was actually a little bit afraid to ask you that question, because sometimes it can just set things off in the wrong direction, but I'm glad I did. And you summarized it beautifully when you said, you know what, it's for me, my dad then. And that's super cool. Going back to, you had some pro anglers fish out there. Have you fished with Gerald Swindle?
I have not.
Oh, that guy cracks me up.
Everybody always asks me, do you know him? You sound like, if I go out of town, people are like, you sound like him. Are y'all related? Like, no. One day maybe we might get to fish together. I'm not real sure, but I'm about the only person that can understand every single word he says when he gets on Instagram and TikTok and starts going on and on, So, but no, I have not had the opportunity to fish with him. I would love that. I would love for him, if he's listening, to come out and fish the Slab Lab with me any day he wants.
Well, I'll tell you what, if he reaches out, you need to let me know that Gerald Swindle's listening to me. I've been a big fan of his for a long time, and
yeah, great guy.
And man, his TikTok, his Instagram, I mean, there isn't a moment that goes by that I don't chuckle, or when they're doing an interview at the Classic, you're just like, oh boy, I can't wait for the G-Man show.
Yes, it always is.
So do you do any bass fishing, or do you do any other fishing outside of the Slab Lab?
Yes, I do. I love, love, love bass fishing. So we have Lake Gunnersville here, which is one of our more well-known lakes that's really close to where I live. So I get to go out on Lake Gunnersville and fish, and I'm pretty much like a bull in a china shop on the boat. So I mean, I cut up, I have a good time, and I really just enjoy fishing, period, to be honest with you. I have had ADHD. I guess I was diagnosed in my early teens and have struggled with it for most of my adult life. But it is so funny. If you put a fishing rod in my hand, I'm a completely different person. And all of my friends will tell you that. It's like I am just focused. I am snipered in. Like I am in the moment. I'm enjoying myself. Like nothing else matters. So yeah, I'll pretty much fish for anything.
I'm the exact same way.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in my apartment. I'm kind of looking around. I've got a bunch of Star Wars stuff on the wall. I've got bluegills, rock bass, pumpkin seeds, largemouths on the wall. I still have my Christmas tree up. I got fly time bench. I've got puzzles. I've got art. I've got all kind. Like you walk in here and it's just this eclectic mix of everything. But the one common thing that's there is fishing, and same thing when I get a fishing rod in my hand, I mean, that's it. That's what I'm doing. And I seem to be able to focus on that. Now, like when you're out on Gunnersville, are you just forget about panfish and you're just bass fishing, or are there some pretty decent panfish opportunities there?
I mean, I think there's probably, you have to define decent size panfish to me, because I have a different perception of what that is. But in a general rule of thumb, yes, there is great crappie fishing, great pan fishing out there. But primarily when I'm out there, I'm on a bass boat. I'm rigged up to bass fish, and that's what I'm doing. Because I do enjoy chasing, PB bass, and that's what I'm always out there doing, is trying to break my PB. So I kind of switch gears, if you will, out there, and it's just one of those lakes that we've had a lot of pressure on it over the last few years, and there's some changes going on in that lake. So catching a 6, 7, 8 pound bass out of Lake Gunnersville is really a big deal right now.
Okay.
So I'm pretty focused on that when I'm fishing it.
Oh, interesting. Well, I mean, living up here, all the way up here in Minnesota, I mean, the internet makes everything so small. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You know, bass fishing here in Minnesota in the last 10 years has really exploded. Our high schools, even up here in northern Minnesota, have bass fishing teams now.
We have them down here in the South too.
Yep, and that's when I first heard about them. I worked with a guy in Berea, Kentucky, who we were talking, getting to know each other, and he said he fished in his high school bass fishing team. I'm like, what? And then a few years later, I decided to quit making forklifts and go to college, so I went to Eastern Kentucky University, and come to find out they had a bass fishing team. And that was the first I ever heard of it. Fast forward many, many years later, I'm back up here in Bemidji. They have the college national championships here on Lake Bemidji, which is funny because all of us locals were kind of chuckling like, I get it. It's the big lake right in town, but there's literally no largemouth bass in there. So these guys had to take off and go. Lake Bemidji is technically a really, really extremely wide part of the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River begins about 45-minute drive from where I'm sitting right now, out of Lake Itasca. And it flows down through, comes into Lake Bemidji, and then it X's it. So it's in Lake Bemidji, it looks just like a footprint. So I just call it kind of an extremely wide part of the Mississippi River. So they had down the Mississippi to another lake, a wide part of the river called Stump Lake, a lot of bass there, or they'd head upriver into more connected lakes via those. But very few guys, or they actually, most of them learned really quick that there's no largemouth bass in Lake Bemidji.
Well, then they are learning the first rule of bass fishing, which is perseverance.
Yes. It was really, really fun to kind of hang out. I didn't personally get to meet many of them, but I was in the bars at the time and I'd hear them talking and they're like, oh man, I'm fishing, 40-pound braid and something busts me off. And I know exactly what that was that busted them off. This is, 50 to 55-inch muskie.
Yeah.
And Lake Bemidji's got them in there. I had a buddy that got one that was just shy of 57 inches.
Goodness.
Yeah, it was like 56 3/4. Yeah, that's a big fish. Lots of big teeth.
That's a very big fish.
Yeah, and they're swimming around out there and whatnot. So it was fun to listen to them, and I thought it turned out pretty cool. I live right downtown, and the lakefront's like 2 blocks away, and that's where they had the stage and everything, and it was really neat to see all the bass boats and stuff in town. So.
Yeah, I love it. I love everything about it. It's always a treat when we've got a tournament come in to Gunnersville. I mean, it's like the whole town just sort of goes down, and for a minute, you're not worried about anything else. You're worried about who's getting ready to weigh in, what are they catching them on, and it's just like, I don't know, for me, it's a sense of community almost, and I have always said fishing is a great connector, period. Mm-hmm. I think it's something that anybody can do. Will everybody like it? I don't think so, because I've got a bunch of girlfriends down here that are like, we think you're crazy. We don't want to fish. We have no interest in it. But if you start them young, if you get kids out there fishing and they start doing this with the high schools and everything, I mean, I just think they have a different view on life altogether out there on that boat and catching fish. It's just nothing like it.
Oh, without a doubt. My daughter lives in Tennessee, and she'll be 9 next month, and she comes up every summer and stays with Dad for like 6 weeks. And I just recently last summer introduced her to float tube fishing. Yeah, and she absolutely loved it, wants to go every day. So she came home this Christmas, and I'd taken her ice fishing a couple of times, but she was pretty little, and she's been bugging me to take her ice fishing. Well, she's only here for 10 days. But we had a break in the weather, and it got up to about 30 degrees or so, 35 degrees. But there was a good wind, and I took her out ice fishing, and she thought it was a blast. So she, she lives just outside of Nashville. So when she comes up here, she gets very much of the outdoor experience, the fishing until dark, the mosquito bites, the stinky fish hands. Last summer, I said, hey, let's eat some fish. I said, we'll keep 4 bluegills. She was mad because she didn't catch, all of hers were technically too big to keep. She was mad because she wanted to chip in on the meal, and I talked her down. I said, hey, don't worry about it. But when it came time to clean them up, she was right there. She wanted to do it, but I was a little hesitant. I was like, fillet knife? Oh, if this thing gets into your finger, it's not like a steak knife. This will go in deep and fast. So she was just completely immersed in the whole process of filleting a fish out and seeing the inside of the fish, and that's something that she still talks about. And
I think that's incredible.
Yeah, I'm hoping that, you know, the lesson will stick with her, and the lesson was, hey, you don't always have to get your meal from aisle 7.
Right.
You can go out and enjoy the whole experience. And her stepdad, he's not an outdoors person, great guy. He's always so jealous. He's even said, man, I should come up there and spend a summer with you so I learn how to do some of this stuff, because it looks so relaxing.
Yeah.
You know, he lived in Nashville for a long time. Now they live kind of out in the country, but he's in the way he talks about their backyard when he sees deer. He'll take a bunch of pictures and look at this. I'm like, yeah, that's cool, man. I'm excited for you. And I'm like, I seen 86 of them today on my way to work. And it's just kind of different, or it's just kind of neat when those two different worlds kind of collide, and then you get somebody that's like, man, I really want to experience that because I don't know how to do any of that stuff.
Right. Well, I think too, you know, if you're out there, if you're outdoors, you know, you get to see so much that you may not have otherwise seen if you were, you know, buried behind a computer screen or stuck in your phone screen for hours. Although I have seen wild things have happened to me when I fish. I always tell someone, you know, the old joke about your fish story and always telling it like the fish is much bigger than it really is. Mm-hmm. People don't believe half the things that us anglers say, but the craziest stuff happens. You know, I've literally had a bald eagle fly down 2 feet in front of me and try to take the bluegill that I was pulling up off the line. I mean, it's like you can't make that up, you know, and you would have missed that moment in its entirety if you hadn't been out there trying to do something, you know, and been out there fishing.
Mm-hmm. And you know, you're speaking to another angler, and I never once doubted you because it's totally plausible. And if I didn't live in the world that I live in, I would have probably been one of those people who said, well, that sounds a little far-fetched, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
I'd like to hear your opinion on social media because, you know, scrolling through Instagram, I follow a couple of different pages that, you know, they really hammer on influencers. And I think some of the influencers, this is more or less in the hunting world. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it is justified. At the same time, I feel that brush gets swathed right over people like yourself or myself mm-hmm. or my friends that are wanting to grow the sport and put stuff on social media. You kind of get just lumped into this influencer. And the word influencer in itself is kind of starting to take on a negative connotation. Exactly.
Yeah, completely 1000% agree that if somebody calls me an influencer, I immediately am throwing daggers with my eyes at you. Like, that is just how it is. Do not call me that. I don't like that, because what I have done is sort of found a gap in the fishing world, if you will, and all I'm trying to do is change a narrative. I'm not trying to do anything. I have 0 sponsorships, 0 contracts. I am not a brand ambassador for anyone. Mm-hmm. I have had those opportunities. I have had those offers. And I'll be honest with you, you know, it sounds real good. We're going to send you all this free stuff, or you can sell this stuff and make money off the back end. That's not what it's about for me. Mm-hmm. I told you, you know, several minutes ago in our conversation, my one goal is to produce a world record bluegill.
Yep.
Do I want to figure out some way to monetize things at some point? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not there yet. Right now, I'm focused on growing a world record bluegill. But I think for me, it was also just complete transparency here. There's so much pressure in the social media world to perform mm-hmm. or to produce content. And if you're with a company, whatever company it is, if it ever put me in the position where I felt like I had to be fraudulent or fake something, I don't want that. And my grandparents taught me a long time ago, trouble lives on Trouble Street. Just don't go down Trouble Street. avoid trouble street. And that, honestly, that's how it feels to me. I see these kids and even adults out here, doing things for the sake of working with a brand or having this logo or having this name, that they're affiliated with. And it's like, your picture is fake. That fish is Photoshopped. Like, this is not real life. And that, I think that's coming more and more to the top. I think a lot of people are starting to realize that, that the content is not real, and that immediately discredits you, not only as an angler, but as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. To be honest with you, I only have one contract right now. It's with an ice fishing company, and I've been with them for a long time, but I was in the ice fishing world. That's really a thing. And I was a part of that for like 15 years. I had long-term contracts with several different companies, and I appreciated the opportunity to help spread the word and stuff like that. I never once felt that I was special or anything like that. But I hear from a lot of younger kids like, hey man, how do I get sponsored? Well, like, what do you want to get sponsored for? Are you in a tournament? Do you need help with an entry fee? And I think a lot of it is, and I hate to make it so I don't know, insignificant, but it seems like I want the clothing and the hoodie and the tackle and the rods and the discount. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to some young people and said, it's not about that stuff. It really isn't. It's appreciated when you're working, when you have a contract with a company, and a lot of them don't understand what that entails either. A lot of that is time away from the water. You've got to be in stores or at shows, doing that kind of stuff. And then when you are out on the water, you always have to keep in mind, I need pictures of this, and this is what they're looking for. I should probably shoot a video of this, and this. And that always takes away from fishing time.
Yeah, it's work. It's real work. And something else that I'll add to that too is, there are lots of companies that I have spoken to that have sent me things, have sent me, free stuff, or that I have purchased from them, that I have fished and then tagged them back in my stuff because it worked. And it's literally that simple for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that it just has sort of crossed this line now with social media and everybody jumping in and wanting to do it, where you've really taken the spirit of fishing out of it. And it has become more of a show, if you will. And there's nothing wrong with that. I post all different types of content, pictures, videos, but mainly I did that because I was getting so much pushback with people telling me my fish were fake.
Right.
When I first started posting my bluegill, people, you wouldn't believe the hatred that was spewed upon me over a panfish.
Well, and that is one of the main reasons why I wanted to reach out to you, and I had my fingers crossed. Man, I hope she gets this message, because I never spoken. I didn't talk to Bruce about you or nothing, but I could tell by the Slab Lab, you're always checking into the Slab. There's something different here. And I would read through the comments, and I was like, "Oh my God, no! It's not what you think it is."
Yeah,
and that's why I wanted to reach out to you. And like, I know my podcast in the podcast world is kind of small, but people will hear this and hopefully spread the word that it's not what you think it is.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. I have never once said that I was catching these monster bluegill out in the wild. I mean, if I was, I probably would be a multimillionaire by now.
Right.
Matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. I spend, along with my dad, so much money to do this. It would probably make you sick to your stomach if I told you. But, I have never said anything other than what it is. I grow them. It's in my bio. I make it very clear. And I just want to share it because I'm trying to change that narrative. Well, I think people have gotten so caught up in catching big bass, and there is something very special about that too. Now, my personal best bass sits at 12 pounds 3 ounces.
Oh.
So I understand that as well. But pan fishing is sort of, it feels entry level. However, it can be enjoyed by even the oldest of anglers. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
It is something anybody can do. And when you catch trophy panfish, it should be up there with trophy bass. I don't care who you are. It should be on the same level playing field as a trophy fish, period.
100%. And to add to what you just said, you said it perfectly. Anybody can do it. When you're bluegill fishing, it requires very little technical ability until you reach that point where you're going to try and get a trophy. And I think that applies to any fish of any color or any shape. I can go out and catch eater bluegills anytime I want. But when I'm out monster hunting, as I call it, before I even leave the house, I say to myself, prepare for a 0-bite day.
Yes,
because
it's a different ball game.
It's a completely different animal. And that is so important that you are trying to, like some of us up here that hunt these things, to change that whole narrative. You know, I have a buddy that he laughs at me. He's starting to come around, but he comes from the competitive walleye world and muskie, professional muskie fishing and stuff. And he's like, why do you chase these kid fish? And I know he's just giving me a hard time. He's been around fishing his whole life, but he calls them kid fish because he knows it drives me nuts. But, but you know, he's starting to come around, and I've had serious conversations with him. I'm like, I know you're just kidding, but you do understand that, you know, a 10.5-inch bluegill is considered, you know, from a natural lake, from the wild, is considered a trophy fish. And he's like, yeah, I suppose so. But, and he said something that I'll never forget was, he's like, but it has that word bluegill. And when the word bluegill in itself just, it sounds like 5-gallon pail, an hour of filleting, and really good eats. And I said, that's exactly what we're trying to change.
Yes.
And even in the wintertime, I can remember growing up, everybody had a 5-gallon pail. Nothing was released unless it was really small. And that was prior to the big technology boom with power augers, now electric augers, drill augers, Panoptics, live scope, flashers, all this stuff. The last 10 years of ice fishing, I'm just going to say 10 years, but it probably goes back even further. More and more people are catching and releasing through the ice than ever before. And it's kind of refreshing. And I used to kind of hate on technology, and I kind of wanted to drift into this a little bit too. And I don't know how much you've used some of this really advanced stuff for panfish, but it's kind of a hot topic up here. I personally don't have Panoptics or Live Scope or Mega Live. I have friends that do, and like in the wintertime, it's an extremely effective tool to find these fish under the ice. These crappies will school up, and you literally just, you know, it's a live MRI under the water, and they're like, oh, hey, there they are, 40 yards that way.
And I mean, and you're again talking about being on a big lake where that would come in handy. I have not ever personally used any electronics, but you got to remember in my lake, my Slab lab, where every piece of structure is, because I helped my dad build it.
You put it in there.
As a kid. There's literally pictures of me as a kid standing on a rock pile in the middle of when we were digging out the Slab lab.
Okay. Like, so how long has the Slab lab been around?
So it's been, we first dug it about 25 years ago.
Okay.
And we've cycled through. We've had two small, small considering what we just went through 3 years ago, two small fish kills. And then the third fish kill that we've had was the one where we had a total loss.
Mm-hmm.
We lost everything. We lost every single fish in that pond.
Oof.
Yeah, it was rough. I mean, the water was black.
Ooh.
And it was a combination of things. Like I said, the perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, all of our stuff failed. We couldn't get anybody up there. We couldn't get any of our stuff up and running. And it just deteriorated very fast because we ran that bleeding edge of, our feeding program and the way that we do things. Because if you're trying to produce trophy fish, you work differently. You don't just sling some fish in there and just let it go. When your goal is to produce, whether it's trophy bass, trophy bluegill, whatever it is, you do things very differently in pond management.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people down here in the South that just have a pond. They just kind of, they might have a feeder, might fill it from time to time. And, 5 to 7 years down the road, might have an 8-inch bluegill.
Right.
Might.
Right.
Whereas in 3 years, what we've done is push the envelope to the damn near very edge to produce what we hope this spring or this summer will be a world record bluegill. And we've done it in, 3.5 years, which is pretty unheard of. So
yeah. And just when I say, the new year, like, I'm going to spend less time on social media and just kind of take a little break from it, you go and lay this on me. So I'm going to be glued on it all summer long.
I'm very hopeful that we will be very close. If not, we'll have it this spring and summer. All
right. We're almost we're just a little over an hour, and one of the questions and you might have already answered this, and I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
If you were to take off and go destination fishing for trophy bluegill, besides the Slab Lab, where would you want to go?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Or have you gone?
I have been a couple of undisclosed places,
okay.
Let me put it that way, that are not quite on the radar for people who don't know about trophy bluegill.
Okay, I understand that game. I understand it. I live it every day.
That's I really don't know where I would go because I have it in my backyard. It's just that simple.
Okay, how about let me throw one at you, and it's been known now for a long time, but Havasu.
I've done a bunch of research on Havasu, and I've seen the 6-pound red ear that just came out, which that took them forever to certify as a world record. Mm-hmm. Have you seen? You've seen? I know you've seen it because you're like me. You know where everything is at all times when it's pan fishing related. I have thought about it, and I've got some friends who have been out there and done exceptionally well, and I would never say no to the opportunity to go fishing.
Yeah. I'm actually, me and a buddy here have kicked around that idea of maybe taking off and heading over that way sometime March-ish or so. One of the guys what's that?
Beautiful lake. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful out there. Like, that the views and just the landscape alone would be worth going to, but knowing you might hook into a 6-pound hybrid, brim. I mean, come on. Yeah, right? I'm in.
Yeah, I watch a YouTube guy by the name of Ty Klebe. I'm sure you've heard of Ty Pig Patrol.
Right. Ty is coming to fish the Slab Lab this spring.
Is he?
He is.
We've been trying to connect to do a little podcast, but I've been following Ty for a long time, and he went out to Havasu, and I mean, oh my God, that GoPro point of view, gin clear water, you can see him down there, and it's like, oh my gosh, looks pretty intense. And those caliber fish, and this is something my buddy and I have talked about, is like, do you dare bring an ultralight? Because those really aren't ultralight class fish.
I don't fish an ultralight at the Slab Lab, and I would not take one there. Oh. I know I have seen ultralights do not work at the Slab Lab. You won't be able to hook. You have to set the hook on my bluegill.
Mm-hmm.
On most every other bluegill, you really don't have to set the hook. You just reel, and they're just there, you know.
Yep.
But I mean, you have to set the hook into my fish when they get that 2.5 pound plus. I'm going to even say 2 pound plus on them. There is a little bit of technique. You kind of got to know what you're doing. And you, like you said, these are predator fish. We hunt them differently. We monster hunt them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my friends make fun of me all the time because I will hide behind stuff if I am sight fishing. And I will literally crouch down and hide and sling sideways to try to reel in. And I never wear white either because bluegill can see white very, very well. And if they see you, they're gone. But I mean, it's like, you know, some sort of ninja fishing. I don't know.
Well, that's crazy because in my reading of the lime phosphorus pit down there, what was it? Tanaka?
Katona.
That's it. I was reading an old, I think it was Outdoor Life. My dad had an old Outdoor Life, and I was reading this article. The story of supposedly how they caught this was they snuck in there, crawled through the grass with these long cane poles. They never stood up, and they weren't hiding from people. They were hiding from the bluegill. Because
they can see you.
They can see you. And they just extend them out over these ledges, this long cane pole, and wait and feel for it. And that's how supposedly it was caught. So that's funny that you mentioned you hiding in the weeds and not wearing white. That makes sense.
Yep. That's it. Because they can see you. And especially like when they're on the bed, you know, they'll bed up real shallow in my pond because of the certain areas we have areas that are sort of almost designated for them to bed. And so when you walk the banks of that pond, they can see you from a good distance away, and you can tell that they've seen you because they will dust up. They'll spin all kinds of dust and make that water real milky where you can't see them because they've seen you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, they're just a cool fish. I mean, they really are.
Well, yeah, and I think that's part of my fascination with them is the majority of their food, especially up here in the north, is, you know, microorganisms. So their eyesight is
phytoplankton.
Their eyesight is super, super keen. Like it's the sharpest out there. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if they can pick out these little clear, you know, scuds and you know, copepods and all that kind of stuff, like, yeah, they can see what you're doing.
Crappie are the same way. So bass have a different eyesight. They have different rods and cones. Their rods and cones in their eyes work differently than that of a bluegill and a crappie. But a bluegill and a crappie's eyes are very similar. So, you know, the same sort of presentation that you would fish for crappie, it's the same you would present to a bluegill pretty much. I mean, there's really not that big of a difference, but their eyesight is very, very similar in the way that they see things.
How about fly fishing? Have you fly casted?
Oh, Lord. I have tried. I just look like I'm out there doing some sort of aerobics or something. It is just, I'm still learning, but I did have, we have the FBI, an FBI headquarters down here in Huntsville, Alabama, and I had one of the guys from the FBI, he was moving down here, friend of mine, invited him out, and he brought his fly rod out to the Slab Lab this past spring and has fished all over and said that was one of the best days of his life.
Oh, that's cool.
Out there with his fly rod. So I said, well, I'm going to take your word for it because I don't have the hand-eye coordination for all of this. That's
funny because that's where my fishing journey is restarting. I've dabbled with fly casting on and off for years, and I'm talking like micro on and off, like do it for a couple weeks and say, I'll figure it out later. This summer, I was like, that's it. I'm just going to start leaving the conventional stuff home. I really want to get into fly casting, and it all came back to I want to learn how to cast again. It's been 40 years since I've learned that. I just want to start over. And fly fishing was one of those things that was like, yeah, let's do that. I want to keep fishing, but I don't know how to do this, so let's start out at zero right there. And that's why I asked that question. I didn't know if you were a fly caster or not, because
Nope.
it's wild when you step into a world like that you know nothing about. And I enjoy the overwhelming feeling of like, oh my God, what is a midge? Now, I'm not a trout guy, but every fly that I've come across, I'm like, bluegill will eat that, bluegill will eat that. Oh, bluegill will eat that for sure. And then I realize,
well, somehow we got disconnected, Patrick. I don't know how that happened.
you know, well, let's just blame it on technology.
Yes.
But yeah, the whole fly fishing thing, you know, I don't know nothing about it, and I step into this world and I feel like a kid again, because there's all this stuff that I need to learn or I want to learn. And it's been a really fun thing so far. I'm spending less time drilling through frozen water to get to fish. I'm being more selective and going, you know what, it's a little bit cold, fellas. I'm going to stay home. And they go, you're going to tie flies? Yes, I am. I'm getting ready for open water season because I really want to get a go at it. And it's just a new dimension to it. And, you know, if you find yourself in kind of a lull, pick up a fly rod. And I've always compared it to golf. You know, you watch them on TV and you're like, oh shit, yeah, let's go play 9 holes.
I'm real bad at that too.
Super frustrating. But just like anything else in the stuff that I've watched and I've read, fly fishing is very much practice. You know, there's legends out there that are, you know, still practicing fly casting because a new line will come out, a new fly line. And it acts differently and it's weighted differently, and they're like, I got to spend like a month here and figure out and learn how to cast this fly line. I think that's super interesting.
Yes, it is, definitely. And that's one of the great things I love about this sport is you can never know everything.
Right.
You just can't. There's always something new to learn, a new technique, new presentation, new setup, new species to target. Like, it's just absolutely endless. And it's such a gift. You know, there's not many things in life that you can say that about, where you just have endless opportunity to learn, to grow, and to develop a skill set, and then to catch a fish, you know, once you've put in that time and you've done that practice. I don't know. To me, it's one of the most rewarding things that I have in my life is fishing, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, the memory bank of all the great adventures, being outside, and not only just the good times, a lot of stuff. I like remembering the not so great trips. You know, I've had discussions with guys that there's so many important lessons in the bad days too. Mm-hmm. You know, the catastrophic, you know, boat broke down or I lost all these fish, and it's just you're right. It's a super important part of life. And like you, I'm super thankful to have these opportunities to spend a majority of my time outside chasing a creature with a really tiny brain that can outsmart me.
Yes. Well, I think deep down at our core, like, it's human nature to want to adapt. Like, you need to adapt. So being out in that environment, you always have to adapt. You know, if you're fishing a new body of water, you don't know what it's going to look like, how it's going to be. So you have to be versatile. You have to know how to throw different things or how to change, you know, your rig up and figure out things. And I think as humans, we have let so much be done by technology and robots. We have forgotten, hey, we are the dominant species here. Like, we're supposed to get out here and know how to do things. And if we don't, we're supposed to figure it out. And it's part of who we are. It's like in our DNA. And so I feed that constantly. I'm constantly feeding that part of me to, you know, challenge myself and try to be good with a fly rod. Right. I haven't seen the payoff on that yet, but I will keep working on it.
Well, and that right there is kind of what you were saying, like with technology and us having to persevere without that, like we won't have automatic casting poles for us.
Yeah.
So that's where that connection really happens. Like, yeah, I have to physically do this. I have to physically learn this.
Yeah.
You know, you get a new phone and you're like, yeah, well, it's a new phone. I don't really have to learn it anymore. You know, I remember when the first iPhone came out, it was like, oh my, and I got my first one. I was like, oh my God, okay, I gotta sit down and figure this thing out. Now it's like, all right, I just got a new object, and my biggest regret is having to pay for it now, $1,000 for a phone.
I know. And think about it this way, 20 years ago, we knew everybody's phone number. I could pick up the phone and call the local Pizza Hut. I knew that number by heart. I couldn't tell you what my dad's cell phone number is by heart right now. Like, so in a way, it's almost handicapped us, not having to force ourselves to be out and be in a place where we have to adapt or change or to, use those skills. And I think fishing is the answer, and I'm going to die on that hill.
Right. I agree with you. Like, I know 2 phone numbers, basically. I know my own, and I know my parents' landline. They still have a landline. That's about it. But to counteract that in try and make myself feel a little bit better, so I'm like, well, if I don't have to know that just leaves more room for more fishing memories.
This is true. So
the cup isn't full.
Coin. Yeah.
Yeah. I just, like I said, I had to bring up fly fishing because you were talking about world record bluegill out of the Slab Lab and 2 3-pounders. I can only imagine what one of those would feel like on a fly rod.
I've seen the guy that came down and fished with me from the FBI. All I could hear was him just screaming constantly with joy. So I can get pretty close to tell you what it's like. And I would like to experience that for myself. So it is something that I'm going to try to keep doing and working on and perfecting. So
awesome. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to let you go because you're an hour behind, right? Or an hour. You're an hour ahead.
I think no, it's 7:54 here.
Oh, okay. So you're still in Central Time.
Yeah.
Oh, see, that whole Central Time zone kind of zigzags a little bit. So I wasn't quite sure because when I was living in Richmond, Kentucky, I was on Eastern Time. My daughter, who lives in Springfield, Tennessee, is in Central Time. I didn't know where that Alabama was because it's kind of like right in the middle there.
Yeah.
Only straight south, but yeah, I'm going to let you get out of here, and I really appreciate you taking the time tonight to talk to me about bluegills and the Slab Lab, and I wanted to get your story out there because, like I said, I've scrolled through the comments, I've read, it's a grown fish, doesn't count, this, that. Well, I knew there was more to it behind it than that, and a lot of people and I'm just going to say it, people just need to read before they comment. Please
or
read.
Just ask. Don't assume. Just ask me because I'm an open book, and I have maintained that from day one. I will be fully transparent about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. If you want to know something, just ask me. Yeah.
Well, now is your opportunity to go ahead and, if you'd like, spit your socials out there. We'll get you some more people out. Once this thing hits, I'm going to be telling everybody about it and being like, hey, you guys got to pay attention because you could see a world record copper nose in a short time here. Short time, yeah.
So you can find me at Sarah the Closer Parvin across all social media.
There you go. You have a TikTok too?
I just started a TikTok. Like, I caved in and I did it, and one of my first videos went viral. It was of an absolute bull male. I mean, he was full in his full show colors and, deep purple and blue, and it got like 900,000 views, something crazy. And I'm like, golly, people are going nuts over this. It's a bluegill. And I was so excited because it was like, I think people are starting to get it. Like, I want to change the game. I want to change the game. So,
YouTube in the future, or do you already have that channel too?
I have a channel. I haven't uploaded anything to it, honestly, because I don't have the time to just edit
That takes a long time.
Yeah, it does. And I don't have the time. I work a full-time job. I have, lots of spinning plates in the air. So maybe it's coming soon. We'll see.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so very much. And I'll be on the lookout. And hey,
okay.
I will extend an open offer, as I do to all my out-of-town guests. If you ever want to experience ice fishing, hit me up.
I might take you up on that. I seriously might. So we'll see.
I've had a lot of friends that from Kentucky that want to come up here in the summertime. And I said, no, come up in the wintertime. It's something you'd never forget.
Yeah, definitely. For sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I'll let you get out of here.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. I hope you have a great new year.
You do the same.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
All right. Bye.